prevail. I'm going to open up this. Make sure we're okay over here. Right, we're live over here. Hello, welcome to some Derps Talk About Games. I'm your co-host, Mango.
And I am your co-host, Buddy.
Today we're going to talk a little bit about games like Civilization and Millenia in particular. But before we do that, I want to show folks at home what it is we do on this podcast.
On this podcast, we like to talk about games. And the thing, I named this episode Civlikes because, and I think that's a bad name for the same reasons that I dislike the term roguelike and Souls-like. But it is also just happens to be really good at defining the thing that I'm kind of getting after. This last weekend was Steam Next Fest. As part of Steam Next Fest, Paradox put up a demo for their new strategy game called Millenia. Millenia is following in sort of the tried and true footsteps of Civilization. And so we're at this weird kind of confluence where Civilization VI, Civilization VII, Humankind, which we talked about on the podcast, I think 2 years ago, last year maybe, and then of course Millenia are all sort of like on the horizon. Stuff is happening with them, right? I have long talked about these Civlikes as a stepping stone to bigger and better stuff, right? It's kind of how, if you're really into I don't even know what I would say, like roguelikes, maybe you start on Binding of Isaac, but you progress, right? Maybe you progress into deck builders like Slay the Spire, right? Like Estrella. Maybe you progress into other, well-known, well-loved roguelikes, Enter the Gungeon, or, even something recent like Cult of the Lamb, right? Well, we're kind of in a situation where now it seems as though the interest in Paradox, who have built this empire on strategy games, right? Incredibly deep, incredibly complicated, incredibly convoluted strategy games. CK2, Hearts of Iron, Stellaris, these are some of the most complex games. Europa Universalis, boy, one of the most complicated games you could probably ever even think about playing, right? But their next strategy game title isn't Imperator 2, right? It's not, I don't know. It's not
Europe
on any number of
5.
other. Yeah, Europa Universalis 5. Yeah, that's true. I mean, they did so many of the memes, right? They did Vicky 3, right? They did CK3. They're going and they're making their Civ-like. They're making Millenia. And I'm just really interested in that. I think that there's a lot of interesting stuff in there. I've obviously been pretty down on Civilization and Civ-like games. What is do you have like an overall like feeling or an opinion about them that you want to like, what is the Mango opinion on Civilization at this point?
I no longer find them compelling because we've talked about this before, because the difficulty's fake, and I enjoy playing them with other people, right? Like, not that I've done that in a while, but I would play a multiplayer game, but that is the only kind of level that I enjoy them at anymore. And they don't hold my interest, but they are effectively they're board game, they're electronic board games. And I think that's like the right way to think about them. And yeah, that's basically it. Like, I'm not
is that also how you felt about Humankind?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't gone back to Humankind, right? Like, it's interesting too, because like this is very much how I felt about playing the demo of Millenia. Is like they all seem to be like Civ, but with a couple tweaks, rather than like something like very different, which is what I get out of like a Crusader Kings. But yeah, what about you? What are your direct thoughts on it?
Yeah, I've always sort of felt like I outgrew them when it came to either more intricate battle stuff, right? So for instance, Total War is a good example of this. Total War, the difficulty is also kind of fake, but like part of the difficulty in Total War isn't just the macro, right, of managing a well-kept empire. It is the micro of fighting battles, right?
Right.
And I would actually say that a lot of the difficulty when it comes to Total War Warhammer 3 comes down to that battle, right? What happens when you have a half, an army that's fought two battles back to back, Pyrrhic victories, right? Half your guys are dead, and you're getting borne down on by a third full fresh stack, right? Can you pull victory out of the jaws of defeat? Sometimes the answer is no. Sometimes you get stack wiped, and you just kind of have to like deal with those consequences, lose some territory, whatever. But sometimes you can make those kind of like heroic plays where even if like most of your guys are dead, you come away with the win, with the victory, because of clever positioning or use of magic, or any of the clever, interesting stuff that you can do inside of the battle itself, right? On the opposite end, you have Hearts of Iron or Stellaris or like CK3, which are sort of these games that are built around asymmetrical gameplay in a lot of
Yeah.
scenarios.
I would say Stellaris
Like
isn't exactly asymmetrical, but like, yeah, but like
yeah, that's true.
part of the fun with CK3 is like you can play as the Isle of Man and like, grow yourself out from there, right? Like, and deal with a game that is stacked against you. Like you said, it's asymmetric.
Yeah, like I was talking about Hearts of Iron, I think last week. I was talking about how the new Hearts of Iron DLC pack adds what are called focus trees for Brazil, Argentina, and Chile, right? And it's like, who the fuck wants to play Brazil in Hearts of Iron, right? Hearts of Iron is about World War II. Everybody wants to play the UK, the US, Japan, right? Germany, right? Like the Soviet Union, the big Axis and
Yeah,
allies kind
or
of.
maybe like one of the prominent allies, right? Like Australia, right? Like something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Like you might understand a version of things where it's like, oh, I'm going to play as the British Raj, right? India, right? And do my best to sort of hold back Japanese incursions into my territory or whatever else, right? And that's legitimately really interesting. That's legitimately really compelling stuff. But Civilization doesn't have that because theoretically everybody is starting from an equal sort of playing field, even if there are strengths and weaknesses to like individual kind of like civs or whatever else. Um, and that weird equilibrium just kind of shows that this is when AI difficulty does bother me, because the thing is that like me and another civ are supposed to be so sort of equivalent, that I feel like I should be able to take on most other civilizations kind of one-on-one, in most of the earlier middle stages of the game, right? Outside of some, like if somebody's playing an early, really aggressive civ, like the Assyrians, I think, right, get a really powerful kind of combat unit in the Bronze Age. And so they just declare war and they house people right up front. That's fair enough kind of thing, right? But it's like, if I'm playing the Germans, you're playing the Americans, both of us don't have our, like our big crazy era stuff that kicks in later in sort of the mid or late game. It feels like we should kind of be able to like fight it out. And what you end up finding is that the AI is actually pretty stupid in Civ, but it just gets a lot of extra bonuses to kind of make up for that, right? Whereas in Total War Warhammer 3, the AI is also stupid. And the AI also gets a bunch of bonuses that you, the player, don't get. But it kind of is a good thing because it's in service to these moments of kind of like heroic victory and being able to crush, an army, like an enemy army that comes out of nowhere, or 2v1ing enemy armies because like you're clever. That stuff works because it makes you, the player, feel really, really clever when you're able to pull it off, right? When you're able to fight back and retake your capital after Cetra the the Imperishable shows up with a doom stack and like completely thrashes you, that kind of stuff, right? There's not moments like that in Civ. I never feel those moments in Civ. And
Yeah,
so I just like for a long time found it to be pretty I don't know.
yeah. I wonder if part of that's just because like in like Total Warhammer, like the game isn't won as much on the overland map. Like that's definitely important, but like in Civ, the entire game is on the overland map, right? There is no
Yeah.
battle map, and I think it's easier to enjoy playing a tough AI RTS battle than it is to even one that's like stacked against you, right? Than it is to kind of like, you know, have to fight against a overworld map enemy who just isn't playing by the same rules. I think part of the thing that also helps with Total War Warhammer is that the none of the factions play by the same rules in the first place, right? And so like it's a little bit harder to see the seams there, whereas like instead of everybody's playing by the same rules except the AI is cheating, right? So
yeah, that's actually very true, right? Because one of the things that's also very fun about Total War Warhammer is like, the kind of rock paper scissors, like the advanced 5D version of rock paper scissors you can get involved in, right? Where it's like, oh, the dwarfs just declared war on me. I need to deal with that. I'm going to make an entire army out of armor piercing melee units, or I'm going to like stack them with cavalry or something that can get into the back line and destroy their artillery pieces. So that kind of stuff, right? This is a moment of strategic expression, right? But it's very rare that I have moments of strategic expression in Civilization, because at the end of the day, all of the units are functionally the same outside of era specific, whatever, right? And even then, the era specific units tend to just kind of like slowly upgrade over time, such that it's not even like I have to dramatically reconsider the way I'm approaching combat when we hit tanks, because by the time we hit tanks, I've been dealing with cavalry, and tanks are just upgraded cavalry, right? There's really not a lot of difference there.
yeah, no, I think that's a good point. Like there's not a lot of unit breadth, and everybody has access to the same units, so it's not like you can accurately kind of think about accurately kind of predict like what if Genghis Khan comes at you like, and in like the modern era it's like, well, he's going to have the 3 units that everybody has, so like have a balance, and I'm probably far enough ahead of him that I can just ruffle stomp him anyway, right? Like
yeah. And I do think that there is something to be said for outside of the combat scenario, right? The internal mechanics of Civilization or any of these strategy games to be kind of fulfilling in their own sense, right? This is what, in my opinion, separates sort of Stellaris and Civ. Stellaris is interesting and unique among strategy games, in my opinions, because it is more about rates than it is about absolute values. So in Civ, I'm paying a lot of attention to the absolute value of what I'm getting accomplished at any, individual sort of like moment, right? So I am building a tank and adding it to my army, and my army is probably 6 to 10 units, right? In Stellaris, I am paying attention to the rate at which I am generating alloys, the rate at which I am generating energy. And I want those rates to be super high, and optimizing for that system across a gigantic network of planets, right, that are all optimized in their individual ways and maxed out. And, you have a research planet that has these kinds of bonuses, all of that stuff outside of the external politics, right, and the need to raise a fleet and all of this other sort of stuff. That management level is fun in the same way that like the management level of I don't know, a city builder can kind of be fun. The interesting thing about Civ is I would say that a lot of those internal mechanics are also similarly fun. Defining where my civilians assigned to a city, what tile they are working, so that I'm getting the maximum benefit, right? Like that is an interesting and good way for the game to be structured. How am I using my builders, right, to build infrastructure in my civilization? That stuff, right? And so if there is an upside to civilization that I am in favor of, it is this sort of thing, right? You have no bad guy to fight when you're playing a city builder, right? You're not competing against anyone else. All you're doing, really, in a real way, is just sort of internally optimizing this system. And I think if there's a place where Civ shines, it's in that vein.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that. Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to talk about some of the differences that are sort of cropping up in these? I am interested. What was it like playing Millenia, I guess?
So like from like a pure review point of view, like I don't know when this is planning on coming out, but like it was very buggy experience for me. Which is a thing that can be fixed, so I don't want to hold it too hard against it because it is a demo. But like I thought there were some interesting changes, right? Like I liked in concept the idea that like the Iron Age could be the Age of Heroes or the Age of Blood. depending on fulfilling a couple of things. I thought that was a really cool idea. Not sure how I felt. Like the tech tree isn't really a tech tree. It's like each age has like, 5 or 6 techs, and like when you get like 3 of them, you can start working on the next age. But you can still go back and get the older techs if you want to. And I don't know how I felt about that. I feel like you'd want to see like the whole expanded tech tree to understand how that was happening. I thought like a kind of handful of different experience things that give you things to do. I thought that was neat. But I'm not convinced it was like the most well implemented. Like I had a bunch of exploration experience, right? But I only the only thing I could do was like buy scouts with it, and that was not particularly useful to me in that point in time. Also,
Yep.
just like weird things around the edges, like the game I played, I ended up losing because like I stepped my units outside of like the bounds of my my city, and it caused the NRS to shoot up so high. Like I was so that like they rebelled, and that was my only city at the time. So like it's like the game's over. um, and like again, I think there's just like roughness around the edges that could be smoothed out. And I thought there were some interesting ideas there, but the whole time all I could think is like this is just like RC Cola civilization, right? Like some neat ideas, but nothing so fundamentally different that I would obviously pick it over Civ.
Yeah, it's interesting. There was a lot of stuff in Humankind that I like more than Civ. I probably think I don't know, I haven't played Civ 6 in forever. I played Civ 6 on launch, and I probably played a lot of it, to be honest with you.
I haven't played Humankind since we talked about it, probably. So I barely remember that game.
I have in Civilization, I guess it's Sid Meier Civilization 6. It's got to be. I have 120 hours in Civilization 6. That's a good amount, right? I probably played 2 or 3 games with that. With Humankind, I have definitely way less hours, right? With Humankind, yeah, I have 28 hours where I beat 1 game. I beat my game. We did our episode on it. And then I technically went back and I started a new game, but I kind of got a dog shit start and I didn't really want to deal with it, so I haven't actually played any more of it since. But there's a lot of stuff that I remember thinking or that I did in Humankind that I liked quite a lot, right? So for instance, the ability of you to make like the fact that you colonize an entire region and the map is made up of these like regions and everything in that region is sort of like something that you can exploit or work off of or use. That was a really fun, interesting experience, right? Because I've always kind of felt that the process of taking territory in Civilization by either buying tiles or maximizing your culture or whatever to kind of like increase the window of your city is like an unfun sort of like piece of the puzzle. The way that that Humankind did warfare, where you sort of fight these battles inside of the map itself. This is actually something that comes from another Paradox game, Age of Wonders. Where you kind of fight these RTS, not even RTS, like these turn-based tactical map battles on the actual map of the game mode itself, and that map happens at a different sort of like place and location. I thought that was a pretty neat innovation. I like the idea of switching civilizations based on your age, right? And there's some stuff that you keep in that age and some stuff that you carry forward. I thought that was all pretty neat and all pretty fun. But Millennia didn't hit me in the same way. Every time I kind of felt like I saw a difference between Millennia and Humankind or Millennia and Civ, I actually kind of felt like I saw a bad difference, right? It kind of had the currency problem that we talked about with Imperator when we played Imperator, and it was just mana is what I think people called it. It seemed like the most that I could do with stuff with these points, like you said, was like buy a unit, right? And I was like, is this the principal way? I built units right off the bat, right? Like I built a scout right off the bat, but I kind of felt like a moron for. I was like, oh, if I had realized that I get 1 XP point for like uncovering the map or something like that, I would have like actually kind of like gone more for that or something. And I don't know, all of that I thought was I don't know, all I thought was pretty not great.
Yeah, I, like with the like those mini battles, I was not a super big fan of them just because um like it I don't know what I'm supposed to get out of them, right? Like this is like after you play like your first 2 games of Civ, you like turn off animations, so it's like I don't need to see the fucking archers fire. I just want it to be done so I can like hit the next turn button, right? Um, and like not only that, but like when like you get like, and this is again, it's more a technical issue than it is like a gameplay issue, but like when you get attacked off turn, it doesn't actually play it. Then you have to click on the icon to see it, and you can't not click on the icon. You have to click on the icon to see it. So, and like the like the bars were not intuitive, and like I thought I read the tip text, but I guess the blue bar is supposed to be like morale, and also like some of the systems like just kind of don't work together in the way that I would like I was like, okay, I'm playing this game. I will shoot for the Age of Blood. Like Rome declared war on me. I'm like, okay, fine. I'm going to fuck you up. And I was like 1 unit off of like the Age of Blood. I'm like, all right, this is a neat idea. Let me see it. And I go to I attack their scout, and the scout's morale breaks so fast that I like have to kill it over like 2 or 3 turns, even though like I should be able to kill it immediately because it like ran away, right? And I'm like, I'm not trying to push it back. I'm trying to kill it, right? Um, and so it seems like some of those like systems just like I've seen this before in other games where it's like, oh, if like the thing that's supposed to mean you're winning means that you're like actually can run counter to your objectives as a player, right? Like breaking the morale fast means you've won the fight easier, but like maybe you just wanted to like execute them, right? This is like the way Total War handles this is like you've won X the battle, but if you want, you can go run down their other units, right? Like
yeah.
And so I like it feels like there's like rough, like again, I don't know when Millennia is supposed to come out, but like it feels like there's a lot of roughness around the edges in terms of like just kind of like
my expectation is that Millennia is going to be out inside of the next few months.
Really?
The Steam Next Fest, you opt into Steam Next Fest. This is the this is like back end information. Here's how Steam Next Fest works. You opt into Steam Next Fest. You can opt into any of them. There's 3 of them per year. There's one in February, one in June, one in October, right? They're 4 months apart, basically. The conventional wisdom, the thing that I tell my developers is go for the Steam Next Fest that is closest to your launch, because that's when it matters most, right? Wishlist decay over time. If I put something on my wish list and then it comes out 6 months later, there's a higher chance that I'm going to skip it versus I put something on my wish list 2 months, right? And it comes out. It's like, oh, okay, I actually remember what this is. I remember playing the demo and I liked it. I'm going to buy the whole game, that kind of thing.
I have definitely had moments where I'm like, I get the email that's like, X is out on Steam. I'm like, what? Why am I going to, oh, I wishlisted this? What is this?
Yeah. Yeah, we call that wishlist decay, right? The longer something's been on some list, the more the value of that wishlist decays over time, right? Anyway, if Paradox is a smart publisher, I guess is what I would say, they would be pushing for a release date in, like the next 2 or 3 months, right? Because otherwise they would have gone in the Steam Next Fest in June, rather than the Steam Next Fest in February. Obviously, I don't have internal insight into their studio. Maybe they have some different plan that I can't, like predict or account for. Obviously, I'm dealing with indies. They're in kind of this AA, AAA space. But yeah, my expectation is that Millennia is coming out relatively soon. In the next couple of months, right? Like I wouldn't be surprised if this was an April or May release.
Huh, yeah. Interesting. I'm looking because it's not developed by Paradox. It is developed by something called C Prompt, which has another turn-based strategy game as their only other title. That was released in 2019 and has 82 Steam reviews. So like seems like a small developer that got picked up by Paradox.
Yep.
This is not relevant to the Civlikes discussion, but like I feel like I'm watching Paradox turn into like a bad bad big publisher. Some of the monetization around like the core titles and like some of the misses. I'm honestly just waiting for them to like totally like for things to like go in such a way that I can be like, if a developer or if a publisher acquires White Wolf, then like that publisher like starts to fail hard. I just finished the Frederick Knudsen Down the Rabbit Hole on Eve. I was like, I didn't realize CCP bought White Wolf.
Yeah, I also had not realized that CCP bought White Wolf. Yeah. The interesting thing I think about that is Paradox just had you are not alone in that feeling, I guess. Paradox just had its like earnings call or something, because I think it hit a it was a public it became a publicly traded company, I think 2 or 3 years ago or something like that. And it's down. Its initial valuation, it's down 87% from its initial valuation, or something like that. This is what I was reading on like the business end of things. And so they shuttered Harebrained Studios, though I think they sold the IP back of like Harebrained Studios back to, whoever it was. The Harebrained behind the BattleTech game that I like quite a bit. I've gone back to that a couple of times. They made a game called the Lamplighters League, I think, that just, didn't do anything. Honestly, I actually thought, am I crazy?
Yeah, I feel like I feel like that was one I either bought or had on my wish list.
Yeah, 342 reviews in 2020 at the end of 2023. Not a great number, actually. I thought it was at least like 1,000 Steam reviews. But yeah, so this is from Harebrained Studios. These are the folks who did Shadowrun in earlier. I think they did Shadowrun in like the early 2010s. Then they did BattleTech in, whenever that was, 2018, 2019. And their most recent title was this Lamplighters League, this kind of adventure RPG, this like tactics strategy adventure RPG thing. Yeah, it just seems as though because of the way that they have structured their company, there is just like a lot of stuff happening that is, a little complicated, I guess, when it comes to my friends at Paradox.
Yeah, no, I mean, and like I said, I think like the worst things I could say about the core products is the monetization scheme, but it's like not that weird. But like it feels like they were not cut out to be the best publishers in the world, right? Like they had success with like Magica, right? Like that was like one of those games that like was very popular. I was like, oh, it's published by Paradox. But like, it just seems like it's not like they're not in a good place as a publisher at the moment. But that is kind of orthogonal to our talk here. It is actually interesting. I did not realize until I looked at the store page, like what was it, like 5-10 minutes ago, that it wasn't being developed by like the core Paradox team. Because this to me felt kind of like Paradox is trying to do a Civ-like game.
Yeah, because the currencies is such a Paradox thing. This is a very Paradox thing that Civ, I don't think, or even Humankind really does, right? Humankind had influence, it had gold, it had whatever production kind of stuff. Civ has science and faith and culture and all this other sort of stuff. But the thing that I thought was interesting about Millenia was just like how many you had, all of the different kinds of points on top of just production, gold, all of that.
Yeah. You have experience for like every domain in the Empire, I guess is the way to put it.
Yeah. How do you feel about this is gonna sound weird, the lore of a Civilization game? Let me attack this from a different way. One of the things I think is unique about these games, or interesting about these games, is that they are all like Civilization, Mankind, and Millenia. They all have this approach that's kind of like mythic lionization of our shared history as humans, right? Even if the game itself might be about, whatever, like exploiting stuff and, I don't know, attacking rival civilizations, I'm still going to have Sean Bean read me an inspirational quote when I finish a research, right? Or I'm still going to have, I don't know, what's another this. I don't know. It's just like that to me is the overall sort of vibe. Whereas Stellaris, Europa Universalis, Hearts of Iron, all of these really avoid that vibe, right? The vibe that you get out of Stellaris is wildly different depending on what kind of empire you're running, right?
Yeah.
And even something like Hearts of Iron, I don't even say that I think even Hearts of Iron or Vicky or like Europa Universalis, these are all intricately based in history, right? These are all like deeply, deeply affiliated with history, I guess. Um, but they're just kind of like more about like the narrativization of history and like the fun twists and turns, and sometimes that includes, you know, like signing the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact
Yeah,
with like Hitler. You know what I mean? That kind of stuff.
yeah, yeah. There's a reason that Germany's leader in civilization, I don't think has ever been Hitler, um, or
Yeah,
like,
it's always Otto von Bismarck,
like
right?
yeah, yeah,
Or
yeah.
maybe it's not. Maybe I don't know. There's probably other ones,
Even in
but
like five, it was either I think it was five that let you like swap out leaders. Like it's always good ones, right? Like it's not like um, it's not
yeah,
like you
nobody
have
ever lets you play Andrew Jackson. You get to play Abraham Lincoln or
yeah,
Theodore Roosevelt or
or
George Washington.
yeah, or like Emperor Tojo or Emperor Hirohito, right? Like um,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah. I actually kind of would love that. Could you imagine? Like, this is something Total War does. You can play the bad guys.
yeah.
Imagine playing a game of Civ and you just get to play, like, I mean, I guess Genghis Khan is a pretty bad guy
Right, but
when you
like
think about it.
even like him or like who's the guy that they always have for the Aztecs uh
Montezuma?
yeah, Montezuma, right? Like people like who like Montezuma did like the human sacrifices, right? Like but like no, it's never like it's never like you go to interface with Montezuma and like you hear like blood curdling screams, like blood drips down behind him or whatever, right? Like it's always like the most it's like the positive spin on those things, right?
Yeah, and also they've been getting more cartoony over time, right?
Yeah.
In Civ 3, I feel like the leaders were well, I don't even know if they were 3D rendered. They might have just been portraits, right? But then, in Civilization 5, now you have these 3D rendered leaders, but they're like trying to be realistic. And then in Civ 6, you have very cartoonishly proportioned leaders, right? Who don't they just don't work the way that they just don't like look like actual people. They look like they're on like a Cartoon Network show. They're on like
Right.
Clone High or something.
Yeah, yeah. I was actually gonna
Um,
say the same thing. Gandhi reminds me of the Clone High Gandhi, right? Like,
yeah, exactly. And I think that's actually that's like actually pretty interesting. Uh, it's funny, man. Could you imagine Hitler? Jesus Christ, Stalin. You
like
could
that
play.
cartoony style, right? Like Hitler, like you go to like diploma with Hitler, he's like, right? Like you're just
I would
like,
actually kind of like, like I actually kind of think that I'm making the case that that would be good. I think I would like Civilization a little bit more. It would give kind of like it's sort of like I've described this problem with WoW story where all of the characters are good guys, right? There's because everybody, like there's no chafing, there's no friction. It's once we got rid of essentially Sylvanas as sort of like a faction leader, all of the characters are good guys who believe in peace, and they want to do the right by their people, and they're not like despotic pieces of shit. And so it's kind of funny, the idea of I'm going to play in my Civilization game, I'm going to play George Washington, and George Washington is going to kick the ever-loving shit out of Hitler, right? Or Genghis Khan, or whoever, like whatever
yeah,
sort of like other evil, evil guy. I've always also liked the alternate leaders. This is a thing that they added in Civ 6 that they never really did anything with, at least to my knowledge, which was there were multiple leaders for the same civilization.
yeah.
So the civilization.
I think it like premiered in Civ 5, and last time I played Civ 6, I don't think they had it, but like it was like it looked like they had set up the system that they could add it later.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it was. Is that they had set up the situation so that if they wanted to, they could add it later, and maybe they did in DLC that I have never played because I don't think I've ever gone back to 6. But yeah, I always thought that would be interesting because that's a little bit like legendary lords in like Warhammer, right?
Yeah,
In Warhammer, you are playing the legendary lord who has these mechanics and has this starting location, and like focuses on this part of the roster or army or whatever else. But he's part of the overall race, right? So you're still playing the Chaos Dwarves, but playing Zatan the Black is different than playing Astrogoth Ironhand, I think is what his name is, right? I feel like you could do something similar, right? You could have George Washington, you could have Theodore Roosevelt, you could have like JFK, right? And they would all be focused on a different sort of aspect of like the overall American Civ.
Yeah, no, and
JFK.
yeah, I'm just thinking to myself, like, yeah, um,
I was trying to think. I was trying to think of like a
Abraham
modern
Lincoln.
president.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. I mean, Abraham Lincoln would have been okay. I was thinking like, what is a founding fathers president? What's like a middle America president? What's like a modern president? Right.
I
Uh,
would say I think you have to keep away from like any real modern politician because like
maybe you could go Dwight. You could go Dwight Eisenhower. I bet.
yeah, I think you could do Dwight, but like I
I
think
don't
you
think
have
you could do Lyndon Johnson. You people be like it would be seen as political by the
yeah.
time you get to Lyndon B.
Yeah, I
Johnson.
mean, like like I was saying, like anything that's like in the modern age has like too much of like how a political bent to it, which you know,
Ronald Reagan. Still alive. No, I'm sorry, I can't get swept down this rabbit hole.
you know what?
Oh, a lot of
Now I'm
leaders that would be
imagining
super
Obama
fun.
with like cartoonishly large ears and like.
What would his mechanic be? His unique unit would be drones.
Now it's just like Donald Trump is like
Oh God.
border wall like like.
That's actually really funny. Oh my God. Holy fuck. Whew, there's a lot of jokes you could make about this. I feel
Yeah.
like I could do this for like every like you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like think of all the Putin jokes. Anyway, whatever.
Yeah, no. Honestly, when you said modern person, I was like, "What are you going to make like the leader of Argentina, Javier Milei, right?" And like, um, but yeah, we should get away from this.
Sorry, I didn't mean to go down this path. The point I'm making is that all three of these games have the exact same approach to history, which is this like mythic, I would almost call it like a history class version of sort of you know, oh, the shared triumphs that the varied cultures
Yeah,
of humanity have, you know, even in their strife, figured shit out. Honestly, you know what's funny? I think one of the things that got me to stop playing Civ 6, and I think about it, I did play one expansion. They had an expansion called The Gathering Storm. Do you remember this?
yeah. I remember because like they put up a stream for like 48 hours beforehand that was just like a tornado, right? Like I was like, I wonder what this is gonna be, right? Like, but anyway, go on. Yeah,
Yeah, and the mechanics of the game is it's climate change, right? It's when you industrialize, there's all of these negative effects associated with you know, like you burning coal plant or whatever. And it's interesting because like civilization has always had pollution.
you're right.
Pollution always mattered in civilization. It's funny because I remember in an old civilization game, I sort of figured out what I think it's Civilization Call to Power, so I'm thinking of. You could have multiple sort of units on a tile at one time. You weren't like locked down. And so I had these gigantic armies of workers who just cleaned up pollution. That's all they did. They just sat on tiles and they cleaned up pollution because I just had like the most insanely polluting empire. And I was just like, well, fuck it, I'll clean it up. You know, the workers just get rid of it in 5 turns kind of thing. But Gathering Storm changed a lot of that, right? You have sea level rise that, you know, that's like a mechanic that you can deal with, and all this other sort of stuff. I kind of hated that mechanic. I kind of hated that expansion. Thinking about it in post, just because like it just kind of made the game worse to play. Like industrialization is so good in terms of output for your Civ, right? That there's this weird dissonance between what am I gonna fucking do? Not build the coal plants and let those guys build the coal plants? And it's like, man, I am not prepared for like the geopolitics of this, right?
Yeah, I would say like that's a real thing, right? Like like industrialization of kind of like they're technically third world countries, but like not in like the kind of developing countries. I think the better way to put it, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's the thing that's happening, right? Is like developing countries need to do this to like launch themselves into like to be peer countries, and like no one wants to be like, no, you can't burn coal because you have to be poor, right? Like but like like you said, like that's not like a fun thing to have in a video game.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of like there's friction that happens in games. I mean, I have lots of thoughts about like friction, right? I think underneath a lot of some of this ways that I talk about some modern video games, it's sort of this like I don't know, not like people just hate friction a lot these days in their video games, and so a lot of the complaints that you will hear about games come down to this thing is friction, and I dislike it, but I don't think that that's like real. Um, but there's kind of good friction and bad friction. Good friction would be like the crises in Stellaris or Total War, right? You have a powerful empire, you reach endgame. Here is this huge, massive like empire level strength that is going to oppose you and come after you kind of thing, right? That's fun to deal with because I have good interesting ways to combat it, right? I build a huge fucking fleet of super powerful ships and I take my Titan and my, movable shipyard and my battleships and all this stuff and I sail them out into, space and I beat back the crisis. Dealing with climate change and Civilization VI is not like that. It's is there a way to interface with it? I don't even know.
I don't know. I didn't actually end up playing the expansion.
Okay, now I really want to play Civ 6 after this. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I want to like go back and sort of like see how some of this stuff like plays out in practice because I wonder. I don't know. I wonder. Maybe I would think it's good. Maybe I think it's good friction. I don't think so. I'm pretty sure I would think it's bad friction, but you know,
Yeah, and who knows what it's like now, right? Like,
yeah.
they've probably there's a bunch of expansions that I was looking at. It's like, oh, there's a bunch of stuff there.
In Civ 6, you mean?
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's a bunch of DLC.
Oh. I understand.
Yeah.
What is their DLC? So the other thing about Civ 6 that's interesting is interesting. It they have these monthly scenarios now. Do you know about this?
No.
They have this monthly thing where they publish a scenario. It's almost like seasonal content basically. And the scenario is you get placed in a certain like date and time and year and like leader, and you have to like beat the scenario, right? So I guess the most recent one, I was just looking at the January challenge of the month is Robot Revolution. Take part in Civ 6 monthly challenges on Steam to earn unique Hall of Fame badges. Today, we're excited to share that the next monthly Civilization 6 challenge, Robot Revolution, is now live. The current events. Do you have what it takes to ensure your civilization's survival for 100 turns in a frozen post-nuclear future from now until February 13th? You've got the chance to prove it. Oh, and did we mention the robots? Resources are sparse, disasters are intense, and giant death robots are a constant threat. Your memory of life before the robot takeover is fading, but parts of the world are still known to you as the Prime Minister of Canada, Wilfrid Laurier. Will you scour the frozen wastelands for resources and remnants of the world, or hunker down and hope to outlast your opponent?
Interesting. Huh. That feels like a thing that I'd like maybe be more interested in because it's like scenario design instead of like, the general kind of like, well, I'm doing the same thing that I always do type of deal. That is very cool.
Yeah, it's like I used to like to play world map setups. Did you ever do that?
No, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, like in Civ 5 you could toggle a thing where you could play on a world map that matched the the world of
the actual world,
Earth, basically. Yeah. And but the interesting thing that I liked about it that I thought was cool, and it's funny because I used to play this, man, I must have played this in like 2012, 2013, like before Total War came out, but would eventually do the same thing, right? The idea was that if you were the Americans, you spawned in, Washington D.C., right? If you were the UK, you spawned on the British Isles, right? And what I would do is I would play whatever I wanted to play. I played Rome a lot back then. I don't know why. Rome is like a fun. The idea of a Roman civilization is very fun. And I played Rome, and then I would list all of the other ones as random. All of the other civilizations as random, so you didn't know who you would get with you on the continent, right? Like sometimes you would be Rome and the French are right there, the Germans are right there. But sometimes all of Europe would kind of be yours to colonize, but you would have, whoever, right? Like the Mongolians or China or the Egyptians or something like that, who could bear down on you from like the east, that kind of stuff.
Very cool. Yeah. Interesting.
Okay. That's interesting. I don't know. Maybe did we talk this out? Is there anything more
Yeah,
here?
is there anything like we ended up talking a lot about Civ? Is there anything about like the genre to talk about? Maybe like
I have one thing about the genre that I am interested in, which is the progression of technology from it's interesting because most others of these games don't deal with this, right? Outside of, I guess, technically a Paradox mega campaign. In a Paradox mega campaign, just for a reference, you start by playing CK3, then you go to Europa Universalis, then you go to Vicky, then you go to
are you supposed to start with
Hearts of Iron.
Imperator now?
Can you start an Imperator?
I don't know. I don't know if that's like is this officially supported that like you can import saves?
Yeah, the mega campaign is real. A lot of people
Okay.
will play mega. Um, but yeah, so that's what like the status of like a theoretical equivalent sort of thing that covers all these different eras. But those are different games.
You can import Imperator into CK3.
Wow, that's incredible. Actually, that makes me want to play a mega campaign. I don't know that I would get through a whole Imperator. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, it looks like it's a third-party tool.
oh, okay.
Is it like an officially supported tool?
I don't know that it's an officially supported tool, but I do know that it's like the intention, I guess, is that you will be able to, convert with your save from one to the other, because at a certain point you're just doing world map conversion, right?
Yeah.
You're sort of tracking who starts where because they all have corresponding, whatever, and you just need to sort of tell the thing what the state of your world was at, basically. Um, okay. Outside of that, in Civ, you have this thing where you're playing everything from Bronze Age military skirmishes like hoplites and spearmen and legionnaires and all that stuff, up to and through, you know, uh, fighter jets, right? Aircraft carriers, that kind of, like all of that kind of stuff. I have never felt like a Civilization game outside of one that I said a couple minutes ago, Civilization Call to Power, which is a pretty old game that I have not played in many, many years, but this is like I played so much Civilization. I loved Civilization Call to Power. I've never felt like any Civilization game matched that sort of feeling, right? It's no way this is on Steam, right? Damn, Civilization Call to Power 2 is on Steam for $4, but I want Civilization Call to Power 1. Anyway, how do you feel about sort of like the progression of warfare from era to era?
It's like a mechanic. I don't know if I have a lot of deep thoughts about it, right? Like it's like it's funny to like attack horsemen with tanks when like you're so far ahead of your neighbors that like you're that technologically ahead, but like I don't know. I always felt like the combat in the Civ games was uh relatively narrow because it was trying to do so many other things. Which is fine, but like there's like not a lot of like we talked about this when we talked about like the war stuff, right? There's not a lot of tactical depth.
Right.
There's like three types of units maybe. And so I don't know if I have strong feelings about it other than like, I think that combat is like a weirdly like underserved system in the game, maybe, or at least that feels that way to me. What do you think? And it feels like it also blooms like combat is only like even gets like vaguely interesting in like the modern eras when you can have like planes and like you get enough unit spread right to like have
I think
pieces.
honestly my overall feeling is that units are not around. Like the thing that I always want, and this is one of the things that I think is in Millennia's favor because of how it works, right? In Millennia, once a new era is sort of triggered, you actually have like this cooldown of turns or whatever, where it's like your stuff is going to take a while to kind of like, I guess I would call it activate, right? But the interesting thing to me for something like Civ is this idea that like I am going to build a bunch of units, and those units are going to be relevant for this, like for a certain amount of time in this era, and then they become kind of like obsoleted over time. What I tend to feel like happens is in Civilization, I like when I'm in the process of building an army, I am almost instantly like fucked out of my army, basically. Do you know what I mean? Um, because I am teching forward and I'm teching, into like units that are going to replace the current units I have. Do you see what I'm saying?
I do, but I just upgrade my units when that's the case, right? Like there's a button, I pay like some gold. I usually play like very money forward, so like it's like never a problem for me.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, I guess it's listed. It's not like a problem. It's really what I'm describing as sort of like an. I feel like the eras move so quickly a lot of the time that they don't have like the turns necessary or like the turns I want in order to be able to sort of leverage this stuff. But like the only option I guess is to turn off the turn timer, which I have also historically disliked just because, the game moves glacially slow when you do it that way.
yeah, no, I guess I feel that.
Do
Um,
you enjoy like the process of like like crafting an army? Like something that I think is fun and engaging when it comes to something I think is engaging when it comes to Total War is the idea of I'm making this 20 unit army and it's going to do some stuff, right? When it comes to Civ, are you just spamming the most powerful unit or do you have what are your sort of expectations?
yeah, for it's been a while since, but like I enjoyed it in Warhammer, right? Because like it has like because units are relevant for the entire game, right? Like yeah, you have to tech into the bigger ones, but the lower units are still relevant at points in time. For Civ, I just kind of like I again because it's like the it's so narrow, right? Like that I was never um I never particularly liked it. Like I always built what like I needed to defend, and then like also I was never trying to go for a military victory. I was always
Uh-huh.
trying to go for like oh I will like found a religion very quickly, and like aggressively convert people, type of deal, right? Uh, or like focusing on other objectives. So like I don't know. I also like we said, right? Like it's because everybody has access to the same units. It feels like there's no point in like crafting an army, right? It's like you gotta kind of have to be reactive. It's like, well, the French are building like a lot of musket men, right? Like I guess I will also build musket men because I don't really have another option, right? Or like maybe like like there's sometimes a little bit of rock paper scissors. Like maybe I'll build
When you
cavalry or
when you
some.
get your era specific unit, do you just like declare war? What do you do?
I typically don't. I typically like the way I typically play Civ is I'm trying to maintain peace and like win by not doing a war. Uh, but that's just kind of like me, right? Like,
I feel like I always feel like I'm leaving kind of money on the table. There's like an opportunity cost to not like if I'm in an era and I have, let's say I'm playing Japan and I have samurai, right? Um, I'm gonna just fight. I need to fight, right? Like I have a unit. It's more powerful than equivalent units in the era. I'm gonna start pumping out samurai, and I'm gonna go to war with everybody. I'm gonna conquer a bunch of shit. That's normally what my thought process is like.
no, and that makes sense. And that's part of why I'm not as big a fan of the way that Civ does it because it's like
Mhm.
I don't know if you remember we played like a multiplayer game like maybe like 10 years ago at this point, um,
The
where
one
like
where was this the one where you and Charles were fighting over my faith because I wasn't doing faith and you
yeah
were trying to convert my
yeah
cities? Yeah.
yeah, but I had like rolled one of the more aggressive civilizations, right? Like, and so it's like I guess I gotta fight because like my whole bonus is like war income, right? Like,
Yeah.
and so I rolled aggressive with that, but like it's like not my exactly my play style, and like also like it's also weird in a multiplayer game because it's like if you win, one of your friends doesn't get to play anymore, right? Like, or like even if you win, you like set them back enough that like they're not like a real contender for the end of the game. Or that
Yeah.
is actually how like basically all of my multiplayer like I used to play by email with
Hmm.
uh man with friends of the cast. Can't even call them friends of the cast because they probably don't know this cast exists. Ben Parker and Danny.
Yeah, I remember Danny, the famous diplomacy days of
Yeah,
backstabbing Danny.
yeah. Um, Yeah, but and I would play by email with them, but like Danny was very, very good at Civ. And like he's like the one that taught me how to like play Civ, like to optimize play Civ. Um, because like we'd be playing and he'd be like, okay, my turn. And he'd be like, why are you taking like 30 minutes? And I'd watch me, and it's like picking individual tiles to like manage. Like, oh, this is how you win this game, right? Like,
Yeah.
uh, but like when we played by email, it'd be like, you know, like the one big game I remember. It was me, Barry, Ben, and Danny took out Barry almost immediately, and I was like isolated on my own island, and so like Danny just had more resources, and he like outscaled the both of us. Ben held on for a little bit longer, but eventually he's kind of like, okay, we're not playing anymore because Danny's, it's a foregone conclusion, right? Like that Danny's gonna win. I feel like that's like with the way that like a lot of Civ games goes. Like at some point, it's a foregone conclusion that you're gonna win. It's just a matter of like ticking down the turn timers.
Yeah, that's the thing that you've always described unfun about PvE board games, right?
Yeah.
Like when we got to a solved state of the PvE Arkham horror game that we played in PAX last year, right? Like that's when the game just instantly became unfun.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why I like PvP games, because it's like there's always room to kind of like needle people and like kick them in the balls or whatever, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I also think that there are like other board games that are like better designed for this kind of stuff in order to like keep it like equivalent. Or like honestly, Stellaris is a great example. I've always had fun playing like our multiplayer Stellaris games, just because Stellaris has a lot of options. You have way more sort of AI stuff to deal with in the empires, and like even if you beat even if I go to war with you, I can like puppet your empire. You're still doing stuff, right? But you're not like knocked out of the game entirely. Right? Yeah, no, you're just a temporary vassal to me.
Same thing with Crusader Kings. I love playing Crusader Kings with people because like one is very easy to like help ally with your friends and like have like an entire world to fight against, right? And then like one of the most memorable CK3 moments I had is I wooed and seduced friend of the cast Nick's wife, and he assassinated me and my son and my other son and my grandson, right?
Or that one time we all went to crusade together and we lost. You never lose the crusades. Normally when you go crusading, you conquer a bunch of shit, but we all were like, hey, do you guys want to go crusade? Yeah, sure. We all signed up for it. I sent like 37,000 troops and we got fucking curb stopped. And we were all just like, what do we do about this? How did this happen?
Yeah, but the Paradox games are designed to handle that, right? Like, the worst that happens is somebody loses, and you pause the game and they pick a different person to play as, right? Like,
True.
And so I've always found that those types of games more compelling. And like Stellaris has that functionality too, but it's also not as much of a problem. That's part of the thing I like about like the Paradox games is like me and Nick play for like 6 hours, and it's like Josh shows up and he's like, can I play? He's like, sure. We pause the game and he jumps into a civilization.
Yeah,
right?
And he chooses whoever, right? And can just kind of like take over and make their empire do what he wants.
Yeah, and like
and if somebody misses the thing, right, like you can just kind of let the AI control their empire, and then back and they're like, what the fuck? Because the AI sucks.
Yeah. It's a little bit rougher with Stellaris, but with Crusader Kings and whatnot, like things work out, right? Like but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no. So one last thing I want to say about this is like I wonder if like there's this pushback towards the Civlikes, because it's like these games are always kind of like a niche game, and like Civilization has relatively broad appeal. I wonder if it's like Paradox and Humankind, whoever the devs were there, are just like trying to or like Endless Legend. Is that like the
Endless Legend are the Humankind devs?
Oh, are they? Okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the people who made Endless Legend, Endless Space made Humankind.
Okay,
I think they're owned by Sega.
Okay, because like Endless Space and Endless Legend and like Galactic Civilization, there's another space one that I'm thinking of.
Galactic Civilization 3 is like, or I think it's actually at 4 now. Galactic Civilization 4 is like so like computationally intense that you need to have like an incredibly powerful GPU just to like run the calculations on all of the math that's going on behind the scenes. That's like a famous thing about the Galactic Civilizations, is that it's like constantly pushing your processor and shit to like its maximum capacity because it's like it's such a complex simulation.
Yeah. No. Maybe there's a couple of different ones of these, right? But like they all seem like like um I totally lost my or they have relatively broad base appeal, but like not as much. And so I'm like, I wonder if like the like kind of like the impetus here is like Civilization has owned the bigger version of the space for a while. Firaxis is weirdly going through some stuff, right? Like because like the guy the I think it's like the XCOM guy left after Midnight Suns. Um uh and so like maybe it's like, well, Paradox is like, well, we're a company that does strategy games, maybe we can get a slice of that Civilization pie. um
Yeah.
and Humankind obviously too is like, maybe we can get a.
The funny thing is that there's like drama associated with, because there are I did not know this. There is a fan war that has been raging for like years apparently between Paradox games, like Paradox fans and Civ fans. And there are a lot of fans of Civilization who hate the Paradox titles. And there are a lot of Paradox fans who are a little bit like me, I would say, who are who really dislike the who really dislike Civilization. And that's just like a really interesting, I like it was so interesting when I was looking up what people were saying about Millennia, that I actually found myself really embroiled in this kind of like fan war. Because the Civ fans sort of think that they're being like poached or pandered to, and they have this like brand loyalty, and it also has pissed off the Paradox fans because they see it as like a weird betrayal, so sort of nobody's happy with Millennia. I also just think that like there's a lot of people who think it doesn't look good, which, to be fair, it doesn't look great. It seems like there's a lot of I don't know, not great textures and shit like that. But like one of Paradox's biggest communities is Hearts of Iron 4, and the Hearts of Iron 4 community like rallied in anger about the announce of Millennia as like the next title. Which, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, so I don't understand why they're angry about it, right? Like it's like, it's not again, it's not a corp. It's not like, people who could have been developing Hearts of Iron 5 or like, I don't know, uh Euro Middle East Simulator, which would be like a theoretical post Hearts of Iron game, right? Like it's not like those people are being pulled away to work on Millennia. It's just like Millennia, right? Like,
God, could you imagine if we got like a what would it even look like? It would have to look like Democracy 3. Do you know Democracy?
yeah, yeah, that
Yeah,
are
yeah.
like, like a Cold War game would be interesting.
Yeah. With like spies and like espionage. Honestly,
Yeah,
that would be pretty interesting. You could maybe do the Gulf War. People like arrows on maps for the Gulf War, right? But I
yeah. I
don't.
mean, the problem is there wasn't anything that was like I don't think you can go from Hearts of Iron, which is global, to like, um,
Oh, I see what you're saying.
like
Yeah.
like to like a thing that's like very like regionally focused, right? Like I get like again, I think the only thing that's like in a constant enough state of turmoil to really work would be the Middle East, and that's probably a little too hot button to like make a game about. Uh,
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that is one of the weird things about the last, I guess, 80 years at this point, right? That since the end of the Second World War, that we have lived in an unprecedented era of global peace.
yeah, like I mean, maybe you could do like a Vicky style, like like it's mostly about economics, and like
Mhm.
war is kind of like a secondary thing. That like you don't really do that often, right? It's just kind of like maybe you send like forces out to do like proxy stuff, like United, you could do like the proxy war in Afghanistan, right? Like,
Or like Vietnam, I guess technically you
yeah,
could kind
yeah.
of cover in something like this. I don't know. It's different because like, the economic stuff is definitely interesting. I don't know. I don't know how
You know
like
what a
how
big
I
part
would
of it
do
too
it.
is like it also represents like the between now and or between now and World War II is like, well, there's definitely national character. A lot of the interesting stuff isn't happening at the national level, right? Like if you're playing in the United States, you just like are you like effectively playing as like Microsoft and like IBM
Yeah,
and like
yeah,
Ford,
exactly.
right? Like, um, that would be an interesting game though. It's like playing as like a corporation, I guess. But like you also don't, it's not, as much as you can like make like jokes, it's not like it's not like Ford was fighting, GM in the streets for like market share.
Yeah,
Right?
like at that point, it's almost like you're playing like Game Dev Tycoon, right?
Yeah.
You know, like that's a tycoon game.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
guess
yeah.
should add a tycoon game to Paradox so that you can take a break from Vicky to go play the tycoon game. You could take over, you know, whatever, like U.S. Steel or something inside of Vicky, and then come back out and play like a political leader. That'd be
Yeah.
wild.
But yeah, no, I think that's why Stellaris is like the kind of end of that line is because at that level planets do kind of congeal into like a thing you can be like, even if like theoretically there's like some economic system underlying all of it, doesn't really matter. You can like abstract that away enough that people don't really care about it.
Yeah. You know, there's a board game called Acquire. Have you ever heard of Acquire?
Sounds familiar.
It's a board game. It's just like by a board game company. I can't remember. It's like the same people who do Axis and Allies and Diplomacy and all those games. They have this game. It's a board game. It's called Acquire, and the idea is you are running a business, and you're competing for like market share and all this other sort of stuff. I have never played it, but I do like know of it, like a famous like board game, I guess, essentially.
Yeah. No, I mean there's definitely ways to do it. Like, okay, I'm looking at Acquire. It looks very abstracted. Like I've
Yeah,
played,
it's got to be, right?
I've played Brass Birmingham, which is like it's like Steam. It's like Victorian era, I think. It's like
Okay.
Steam Rail stuff, and it's industrialist focused. And that's like it tends to hew the theme a little bit better, but you know, but yeah, I've played Puerto Rico, which has some of this in it. But the thing is like everything has to be like abstracted to the nines, otherwise it doesn't like make sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But we're over the hour. How was your week?
It was pretty good. How was your week, buddy? How you doing?
It's been good. I guess you're throwing it to me then. I am still playing Street Fighter.
Oh, I did not mean to do that, but I guess I did do that.
Still been playing Street Fighter 6. I've bounced back under I've bounced back and forth over the platform line a couple of times now. But you know, that means I'm at about the right level, and as it get better, I'll keep going up. I've been playing more Cyberpunk. It's kind of going through that game at like some level. I'm kind of at the like I should just kind of push and finish this game because like the side like the actual gameplay moment to moment isn't as compelling to me anymore. What else? Yeah, I can't really say I didn't watch a ton of stuff this week. I finished, like I said, I finished Down the Rabbit Hole for Eve, which was I think super fascinating. I highly recommend everybody go watch that. It was fun. Like, have you ever played Eve?
No, but I know a lot about it. I have Eve's a game I've like watched a lot of YouTube videos about, I guess. The Down the Rabbit Hole is a good example.
Yeah.
But
like I have played a lot of, or I have tried to get into Eve, like, a handful of times, and every time I do, it's kind of like this is not compelling to me. Like the thing that makes that game so interesting on like a bigger scale is the thing that makes it kind of unapproachable, which is like you have to like literally spend like most of your free time in it. Hello, Orion.
hey, what's up, little boy?
I don't know if you
Say
guys
hello
have
to
heard
the
it,
camera.
but Mr. Collins has been meowing at me. I think he wants me to
I
either
have not heard it, unfortunately.
either wants me to feed him or leave so he can poop without me seeing.
His name is Mr. Collins.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Um,
Okay, get down, little boy.
but yeah, like it's like a super interesting system. It's just like one that like basically one of those things where it's like when like one of the things that I was interested in Eve was arbitration, and I did that for a little while. I was kind of like, what's the point? And like basically my desire to do things in Eve turned into like a desire to just like learn about the real stock market and make real money. So like that's kind of the substitution effect there. Not that I'm a particularly skilled stock picker or anything, but you know, that's like the
Yeah, that is actually, I guess that is pretty interesting. I have always liked Eve in the same way that I liked Foxhole. When we talked about Foxhole, like not that long ago. Because the idea of this like persistent world and this persistent war that is going on and that you can sort of like deal with is like super interesting. It's the kind of thing that I just like. I think a lot of people when they talk about their love of MMOs are talking about this thing, right? It's like, God, imagine if like me and my guild could go take a town, right, and build stuff in that town and control whatever. And it's like Eve and Foxhole actually have the ability to give you that fantasy if that's what you want, basically. Which I think is neat. I guess. So yeah, I don't know.
It's neat, but it's like not approachable. It's not like a thing you can do like on a Saturday, right? Like you have to like
Yeah.
be involved, which I think is kind of like the big sticking point for me at least, right? It's like I don't want to spend, all of my free time learning about like, the current political situation in Warfront or what's the name of it? It's Foxhole, or like navigating the internal politics of an Eve alliance. I want to just kind of go do something. And I think it's funny because I think the thing that really scratched some of those itches are like the survival crafting games, right? Like Minecraft,
Yeah.
Valheim,
or whatever.
Yeah. There are things that you can like sit down in an afternoon and kind of do. Even without like, and if you want like some PvP aspects, there's some ways you can do that, but like, it's like, I think that's the way that kind of has to be. Like, if you want it to be approachable, you have to have like a resetting system. And like, I thought Crowfall had some interesting ideas there, but Crowfall fell apart. So,
Oh, did it?
Yeah, I think it fell apart like a year ago.
I remember we talked about it a long time ago, but I never followed the news for it.
Crowfall is offline. Yeah.
Rough.
No, they did some cool stuff, or they had some cool ideas, but like there just like wasn't enough there, right? Like, but like the idea, part of their idea is that like the campaign worlds would work for would work for like 6 months to a year, depending on the speed of it, and like you could pull stuff out of that into like into the overworld, but Crowfall in the what's it called? But like the idea was that like the game would reset every 6 months or so it wasn't like you were permanently locked out of it like you kind of are with Eve, essentially, right? Like
yeah, like with Eve, there's nobody who's gonna get as powerful as I want to call them Goon Squad, but they rebranded
Imperium.
I guess they're the Imperium now. Yeah.
Well, I mean, there are, but like you could, but it would take a forever and a day, and the fact that you haven't been playing for the past 10 years is like a big detriment to it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I also think that this stuff makes for more interesting kind of like stories than it does for kind of like on the ground action, right? Like the idea that someone spied and ingrained themselves in an enemy corporation, and when all of the other officers of that corporation were online, that person kicked those other officers out of the corporation, stole all of the money, and gave it to his master. Like the person for whom he was spying. That's like an interesting or like funny story, but nobody actually wants to spend 6 months of their lives becoming friends with and lying to these people such that they get into a position to do that. Do you know what I mean? That like it makes for a better 20-second tangent in a YouTube video than it does an actual facet of your life, the thing that you do and play.
Or like a what's it called? Like a piece. Like I remember reading that story, the Golden Guiding Hand Society story. I remember reading about that in PC Gamer and thinking that was so cool. And then like booting up Eve on Live and being like, I'm clicking on rocks, right? Like and like maybe there is a version of it where like it would be like I did a. Do you remember there's this browser game called Nation States?
I remember Nation. I'm sorry, you're talking about the JHU Nation States thing?
Not if it was at JHU, I wasn't part of it. I played it in high school.
Oh, okay.
Actually.
I played it in JHU.
But like it was like this website, and like you could just kind of like play the game as like solo, and no one would bother you. But like I got very involved in like one of the forums of kind of like the metagame, like where people actually like fought each other, and I had a lot of fun with that, and then I just dropped out of it at some point. Uh, but like, and that was fun to do for a while. But like there was, I remember this because like there was a picture of like a TI calculator knocking over a fan, and it was like the funniest thing in the world to me. But it was like such an in joke that like no one would uh, no one could understand it. But like, and like that was a lot of my time, and I had fun with it. But like, I can't see myself going back and like I understand like why it compels some people, but like again, if I had that kind of time and energy and focus, I would put it into a thing that like benefited me in real life, right? Like I would like, yeah, like I guess that's the end stop, right? Like
yeah, I mean, to me, a lot of this just comes down to the theory is not worth the juice isn't worth the squeeze, right? Something like WoW is a little bit different because the squeeze is the fun part.
Yeah.
Raiding itself, the act of raiding is fun, right? Doing your rotation, parsing high, even just the thrill of beating a tough progression boss, right? That is the fun of the thing. And it is like the direct minute to minute actual sort of like gameplay. If there was a world in which like you could maybe combine that version of playing the game with this macro stuff, you could probably like solve world hunger with the amount of money that game would. It would be truly amazing. But part of the issue is that like someone is always kind of doing the for lack of a better term kind of like bitch work. If you're going to be part of an Eve corporation, you're working your way up from the mailroom. The mailroom is a mining ship, and you just have to go and click on rocks and fill your mining ship, and then take it back to base and give it to your masters, kind of thing, right? And it's only the people who do that enough times that can like make kind of like progress in these like macro kind of like corporation structures. Whereas like a WoW raiding guild has some similar kind of things, right? Like you have people like me who will craft gear for people, or you'll have people like Serpang's wife used to, like, all she did was played WoW, and she wanted to go and gather all of the food necessary in order to make feasts, and then she gave the feast to Serpang, and then Serpang would give the feast to us. That was her kind of contribution to the right? Pretty simple. But like that's like a social network of like 30 people, not a social network of like 1,000. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that's the inscrutable part.
I think part of it too is like, in order for it to stay fair, like the power has to kind of like do that kind of like logarithmic fall off thing, right? Like somebody who puts in like like every marginal hour you put into the game has to give you less reward in order to keep like someone who only plays a little bit from not being so far out there they can't play with people who play a lot, right? And in that case, you have like you said, the squeeze has to be fun, right? Like you really enjoy Mythic Plus, right? Like you like push out your power by playing Mythic Plus, right? Like theoretically, I could maybe push out my power by just continuously grinding world quests so that I get enough Wormling Dragon crests that I can convert them up into Drakes, that I can convert them up into like whatever the next level is, and get enough of those so that I max out my gear at the heroic tier, so that I can then start doing that whole thing again to get like the next level up. But like that is so much grind that I'm not going to fucking do that, right? Like if I really wanted to do that, I would like learn Mythic Plus and do that. And I don't want to do that, which is totally fine. It's just kind of like, but I can still play. I can still like do heroic level the rating and have it not be a problem.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely very true, right? Like when it comes to Mythic Plus, the best reward out of Mythic Plus, I think most people would say, is the mount, right? You get a seasonal mount, and like you get that mount at 1,500 rating, which is not hard. That's not like 2,000 rating, which is like not that hard to achieve, right? You and I could do this. I could literally get you that mount today, like if we wanted to. We just go. We would blitz a bunch of these dungeons at like 18s, and I'm sure that like somebody would get it. And then from there, the rewards get more and more sort of tapered off, right?
Yeah.
You have Keystone Hero, you have the portals, right? The portals to the dungeons are a weird mark of like
It's bragging rights.
something, but like it matters so little. The thing about the portals, you teleport right to the dungeon. How great is that, right? But when most of the dungeons are not like, the Dragonflight, Dragon like world dungeons, they have a thing called the timeways where you walk into the thing and there are portals to the zones where each of the dungeons are. And to be fair, those portals let you out a little bit further than the portals you get from completing the dungeons at a keystone like 20. But like at most, like you're saving like 2 minutes of like maybe loading screen and flying, right? Like it's just not that hard. You are just not saving that much time by getting the portals. I guess technically the best version of this is that if a dungeon rolls back into the rotation and you happen to have the portal for it, it's nice that you start with the portal from day one, right? So for instance, when Shadowlands comes back around, I'm going to have a bunch of the Shadowlands portals on Bairn. That's going to be neat. I'm going to be able to do Shadowlands dungeons on Bairn with portals that I earned 2 or 3 years ago. Maybe that's the best thing. But like even then, if somebody doesn't have the fucking portals, it takes them 3 minutes instead of 20 seconds to get to the dungeon, which is just like not that big of a deal. And then you also have Keystone Hero, which is 2500 rating, which all that does is give you the unlockable cosmetic effect of the mythic raid appearance. I don't know if you know about this. You know how mythic appearances typically have different VFX on them,
Yeah.
like associated with them? You can get that in Mythic Plus, you can get that in PvP, and basically you just get to a high enough level in either one of those. You get a little item and you click that item and it gives you the access to that VFX package, right? It basically clones it gives you another set of armor that has the VFX package applied to it immediately. Like for every item you have of thing, it gives you whatever things. And it's like that's cool, but like this stuff like ultimately doesn't matter. The top of the top end, they get a title. That's like the I would say that is like a logarithmic distribution curve of rewards for
Right.
something plus, which definitely is in keeping with kind of what you're describing when it comes to I don't know, when it comes to Eve.
It doesn't come to Eve, right? Like it is not quite so logarithmic, and that's like, part of the problem.
Yes, I'm
right?
sorry. How you are describing
Yeah.
what the mechanics of Eve should theoretically be like, I guess is what I mean.
And then the problem there is if you don't like have like these big systems to interact with them, people like get bored and you have to give them more content, right? Right, like if it was just Dragonflight for another 9 years, right? Like you and I would probably fall off probably within like a year, right? Like
Yeah.
um I mean, like we're kind of I don't know. You went into maintenance mode earlier this year. I've kind of just been getting on for raids and some other little stuff. Like there's like a couple of like story beats that I want to hit, but I just haven't had the time to because I wanted to do other things. So
Yeah. That was me for basically all of 10.1, right? I barely played that patch. I played a middle amount in the beginning. I probably played the first like 3 or 4 weeks of it, and then kind of went instantly into just kind of logging on for raid, and that's it. And even then, this was like right Trey, I wasn't even logging in at the end of it. I just kind of like came and guest starred when it came to like the final push to get AOTC. I feel like we're getting close to that point now, right? It has been 10 weeks since the patch came out, and to be fair, I've still played a lot of WoW. But part of what I'm doing now is I'm like pushing for like rating. I'm like one of the top 100 arms warriors in the or maybe in the region. I don't remember region or world I'm looking for. Like I'm the top warrior on the server, stuff like that. It's like,
yeah,
at a certain point, you kind of have to compartmentalize, I guess I would say, your focus or excuse me, your sort of interest.
yeah. Um, did you watch the Super Bowl?
I did not watch the Super Bowl. I was in Mythic Plus chat with Dave while Dave was watching the Super Bowl, so I did hear about the heroic, end of the Super Bowl, I guess.
Just like the scriptwriters demanded. No,
yeah, exactly.
but yeah, no, it was a fun watch. I kind of like half watched it while I did other stuff until like the end when it was like, oh, stuff's doing pretty, getting pretty like tight at the end here. It was a fun watch. The commercials were okay. I really liked the Michael Cera commercial. That was probably my favorite one. Speaking of certain things that we've been talking about all night, the one that everybody was talking about that like I thought was hilarious is Volkswagen did a commercial, right? And they started in the 1940s, and everybody was like, "What?" And it's just like in New York, it's like, "What were you doing in the 1940s, Volkswagen?" Right? Like, and like they move forward through history, but it's like, why would you start it in the 40s, right? Like, my favorite,
Wow.
my favorite was a tweet. It was like it's just a picture of was Nathan Fielder. It's like, so we're gonna do a Volkswagen commercial and start it in the 40s.
Are you happy? What are your thoughts? I wanted the Chiefs to win because I'm sorry, it was the Chiefs who won, right?
Yes.
Okay. I wanted the Chiefs to win because I wanted Taylor Swift's boyfriend to win. Mostly because I thought it would be funny. That's it. I just think it's funny that like Taylor Swift has become the like focal point of this whole thing.
So, I also was vaguely rooting for the Chiefs, also because of Travis Kelce. I've had Travis Kelce on my fantasy football team for the past, like 3 or 4 years. I'm sorry. My cat decided to stop meowing at me and take a big shit, and it smells really bad.
Oh my god.
Uh,
I'm sorry.
it's
I
okay.
mean, it's okay. We can wrap.
No,
It's pretty soon.
we'll get there. I'll be fine. Um, so I've had Travis Kelce on my fantasy football team for the past couple of years. He did not do as well for me this year. Basically, my strategy when doing fantasy football is typically look for high differentiation players. Like I have had Travis Kelce for the past 4 years. This year I had good picks, and so I got him. He was like the number one draft pick this year. Like generally, like in like by ESPN's rankings. But previously he wasn't. But I would always pick him up early because he was always that much better than like the second and third ranked tight ends. And so I'd be like, I will sacrifice having a actually no, I would usually pick up like a first tier wide receiver or running back as my first maybe second pick. But like I will sacrifice having a less good or I will sacrifice having a better wide receiver running back 2 in favor of having the best tight end, and that has worked very well for me. I won my league last year. I barely I did not even make the playoffs this year. And so because of that, I had Travis Kelce for a while. I wanted him to win because I thought he was, like because of that. Not because of any kind of like deeper stuff about like his relationship with Taylor Swift or whatever, just because.
Yeah, I think his relationship with Taylor Swift is just like funny on a narrative level. It amuses me the way that people talk about it on social media, and I just kind of like I don't really know how this happened, but just like it is truly did you see all the High School Musical gifs or like videos?
No.
Okay, I don't know how I ended up on this version of Twitter last night. My Twitter was full of videos from High School Musical, which is a story about a like the musical is happening and the star player on the basketball team secretly loves music or whatever. This is Zac Efron. And I guess it's Vanessa Hudgens, Selena Gomez, one of the two Disney ingenues, right? Who are just like is like the star of the musical, and they have this like they have this romance or whatever, but it's just like it maps so perfectly onto Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce because I'm sorry, is it Kelce?
I'm not sure actually. It's either Kelce
Whatever
or
this guy,
Kelce.
whoever this guy is, I don't even know. I don't pay. I don't even care to learn. Okay, just like the idea of this star football player, right, and the most popular pop singer in the world, I guess. And it's just there's something about that I just find so fucking amusing that I don't know. I just really wanted the fairy tale ending. Okay, though he didn't propose on the field, which is what Dave predicted. Dave was like, if Travis Kelce wins the Super Bowl and proposes to Taylor Swift on the field, we'll know it's rigged.
So the answer to your question is apparently the way it's supposed to be pronounced is Kels. Neither Kelce nor Kelsey. It's supposed to be Kels.
That's so disappointing. That's like the worst possible version of the answer. Oh.
Yeah.
Hey, I have one more question for you. How is fucking World War II battleships or whatever?
Oh, yes, that. As Buddy knows, because I posted it in one of our mutual discords, I play Wargame Miniatures, and the group met on Friday. I ended up playing a World War II battleships game. The people like I love this group because the people I'm playing with, like they're just like sitting, like the one guy sitting there just like rambling off facts about the specific ships, because we were playing like a specific scenario. It was like the English versus the French merchant marine, which is like a whole thing. It's like an early like 1940 or 41. It's like a very early battle. That's
Okay.
like post German occupation, but the French merchant marine isn't technically Vichy. It's just kind of like a French pride thing or something. But it's like uh like like a half dozen, or no, like 10 to 12 destroyers versus like a couple of bigger battleships, and you just like, move your ships around and you fire at each other. And like a lot of these games are like based in like a written set of rules that like the people who are running the games have like put a little bit of like their own spin on, and so like talking through the way things work, and they're like sometimes they're like very like this ship has like primary guns and secondary guns, and two of them are mounted in the front and two of them mounted in the aft, and so like you have to like do a broadside if you want to shoot with all four of them, whereas the French one has all 8 guns in the front, so it doesn't have to do that. And like and some of them have torpedoes that you have to launch out of the side, and like if you're firing from this way, you roll this many d6s and you have to get a 6 up, and if you're this far away, you have to get a 4
Oh my
up.
God.
Yeah.
This actually sounds like so perfect for me, because I do know like a lot of these like dumb facts about like World War II battles when I became like obsessed with World War II. Like imagine playing like the Battle of Midway or something. I'm sure there's like like one of the famous things about the Battle for Midway, the Japanese turned one of their aircraft carriers into essentially a floating bomb. Okay, because they had 2 different kinds of ordnance. They had air to ship and air to air ordnance, and basically the question was, are we deploying our fighters to attack enemy aircraft carriers, or are we deploying our fighters to defend our aircraft carriers? And the order got made that they needed to refit for, I think it was air to air, so they took all these bombs off of the Japanese, but they didn't have time to store them properly below deck, so they were just sitting right below that, like the hangar floor. They're just like sitting right below, and they were also doing all this refueling. So there's like gigantic pumps of gasoline that are constantly like fueling up these Japanese Zeros, and an American dive bomber who's actually from New Jersey, and I can't remember I think his name is Dick Best, scored a hit, and the hit ignited the gasoline, which exploded, which ignited all of that ordnance, which just destroyed like the whole aircraft carrier. It's like you could have rules for all that shit, which would be awesome.
His name is Dick Best.
I'm pretty sure his name is Dick Best. Hold on, I'm sorry, he's super famous. Richard Halsey Best, a dive bomber pilot and squadron commander in the United States Navy. Yeah, the thing that is like crazy about him, he sank 2 Japanese aircraft carriers. We sank 4 in the Battle of Midway. He sank 2 Japanese aircraft carriers in the same battle, which is wild, right? Like truly insane, like absolutely incredible stuff. Yeah, he's from Bayonne.
Yeah, no, that's so people have like incredible names, and you just kind of like, okay, I guess that's real. But yeah, no, ships were super fun. The group's super fun. Unfortunately, I'm not gonna be able to go because next one's during PAX, and then the one after that I'm also busy during. But
Rough. Sorry,
yeah.
buddy. Are you excited? Are you excited for PAX?
I am so excited for PAX. I have.
Do you have any big plans?
My big plans are to like play stupid Magic decks.
I do need to buy a bunch of singles for my Magic deck, because I started looking and I see a bunch of neat Eureka stuff that I can pull up, and I might make a new deck. I kind of want to.
See, I have my cap and stack. Like I haven't put it together yet because I need to like make some decisions. I have like what I've got. Here I've got Sauron the
Oh my God.
Yeah, I know you're gonna be mad about this, but I've got Sauron the Lidless Eye.
The Lidless Eye. What a good name.
Yeah, and this is like there is a blue black red version of him. This is the
Okay.
red black version of him. It's like Sora.
That's cool. I like red black as colors a lot, but I feel like the red black color scheme is always like, the traditional Rakdos version of red black is like very like sacrifice resources thing, which is like not a fun archetype to play, I find in most.
Yeah, I mean, I've told you what my strategy is. It's like, mind control and sacrifice. So I've got a similar one. The Beast, Deathless Prince, which I think is I think it's like a Doctor Who card.
Okay.
Which is like, it's a bad card, but it's on theme. I've got Jury, the Master of the Review. I've got a bunch, all these decks, I have like a bunch of cards that could be the commander that I like, I've got the one that I intend to be the commander, but like, if I want to switch it out at some point. But yeah, apparently they just updated the commander ban list. Nothing super what's it called, mind blowing on there. Just like, some of the more oppressive cards. Yeah, I'm excited for PAX because I've got that. I'm supposed to cosplay one of the days. I'm going to cosplay one of the days with my girlfriend. My girlfriend's putting together a pink ghost costume, and I'm going to be Captain Price. So I'm going to shave this and have the hat.
Oh my god!
I need to put together get like better versions of the costume stuff. I have. But yeah, also excited to see you in person. Excited to see the Aquapara booth. You guys are doing a booth this year, right? I assume you must be. You're hiring people, right? Yeah.
I am super excited. I'm super excited for that.
So. Are you guys? Are you? I know every year you're like, maybe I won't work this year, and I'll just go and have fun. I assume you're working again this year.
I am working again this year. I am working again this year. I am also. But I am also going to be spending a lot of time away from the booth. I have a lot of I'm kind of like the business guy in the ground, so I'm going to be meeting with a lot of the developers and other publishers and all that kind of stuff. So yeah,
very cool. Very cool. Yeah. Well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'll let you get out of the cat shit, I guess, buddy.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I was. If you get anything else to talk about, we'll close this out. If you'd like to email us about any of the things we talked about on this podcast, you can email us derpsgames@gmail.com or podcast@derpsgames.com. You can follow us at twitch.tv/derpsgames or youtube.com/addsomederpsgames, where these go out live. Rate and review us on wherever you find podcasts. All the links down in the description. Buddy, do you have anything else you're looking to promote?
I have nothing else I'm looking to promote. I do want to mention that I played a Cryptmaster. Did you see this? The Cryptmaster D&D stream? I plugged it last week on the podcast right here.
I did not. I saw that it went up. I did not watch it.
Yeah, we're putting up like an edited version on YouTube, so you will be able to see it. It was crazy. We got a lot of people liked it a lot. It was super fun. We're in Cryptmaster. The characters you're playing are zombies, right? So the very first thing is my body was not on my head. And I had to go and pick up my head and kind of like splotch it onto my body. And then I guess, I don't know, spoiler alert for anybody who wants to remain unspoiled. At the end of the adventure, there's like a magic field. And I was like, okay, well, I take my head, I pop it off my body, I put it on like the bench next to me, and then I walk my body through the magic field and it vaporized my body. I was like, I couldn't have better walked into that. That was like so funny.
Was it in 5e like rules? Was it okay?
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Very cool. All right.
Okay.
Well, look for that, I guess. And then I'm going to say until next time, dear listeners.
Until next time, loyal listeners.